Good evening, everyone. Welcome. Hello, and welcome to Target Free Thursday Nights here at the Walker Art Center. My name is Allison Herrera, and I am part of public programs here. Before we begin tonight's program, I'd like to tell you about two upcoming Target Free Thursday Night talks. The first one being on October 22nd at 7 p.m. here in the cinema. Filmmaker Astra Taylor, who will share her experiences about being homeschooled and how it shaped her educational philosophy. Her film, The Examined Life, screened here at the Walker at this year's Women with Vision Film Festival to sold-out audiences. So you should definitely come and hear her talk. There'll be a screening of The Examined Life that on Wednesday, the 21st. So you should come and see the film and then come and see Astra talk. The next is artist Dan Graham in conversation with Bennett Simpson and Chrissy Isles, both of whom are the curators for the exhibition Dan Graham Beyond, which opens here at the Walker on October 31st. Graham has been a central figure in contemporary art since the 1960s and has created a body of work which includes photography, film, video, writings, architecture, and performance. I should note that the Brooklyn-based band Japanther who played during Graham's puppet opera Don't Trust Anyone Over 30 in 2005, will kick off the event with a short set. So you should come right at 2, the event starts at 2 p.m., not here in the cinema, but in the McGuire, in the newer part of the building. You should come right at 2 to catch Japanther and then see Dan Graham talk. So it'll be a treat, to say the least. So if you find yourself bored watching television with nothing to do or tired of the national healthcare debate, you should come here on Thursdays and check us out. So tonight I'd like to introduce tonight's guest. I'll begin first by telling you roughly their answer to the question, how did you come to clay, which they were asked by Dirt on Delight curators Janelle Porter and Ingrid Schaffner when it opened at the ICA, Institute for Contemporary Art in Philadelphia. Their answers vary, but each felt a connection to the tactility of clay itself. Each were intent on studying art in another form, but became interested in clay almost by chance. Each said that once they were introduced to the medium of clay, that was it for them. Our first guest, Kathy Butterly, was studying at the Moore College of Art in Philadelphia when Viola Fry demonstrated her work for students there as a visiting artist. She was inspired by the way that the petite Fry wrestled huge pieces of clay. She says, "I couldn't believe that this woman who is about my height could make these big macho things." She was then encouraged to study at University of California, Davis with Robert Arneson, who became her mentor. She graduated from UC Davis in 1990 and went on to exhibit at the Sculpture Center in New York, ICA in Philadelphia, the Camden Arts Center in London, and the Hirshhorn Museum in Washington, D.C. She has won numerous awards, including the Evelyn Shapiro Foundation Grant and the NYFA Grant. Anne Agee was our next guest. Anne Agee was studying at Yale School of Art, where she received her MFA. She was becoming restless and decided to take a class at Greenwich Pottery House in New York City. There, she became smitten with the process and history of clay, as she continues to be. Her work has been exhibited at the PPOW Gallery and the New Museum in New York City, as well as the Peabody Essex Museum and the Rhode Island School of Design. She has also won numerous fellowships and awards, including at the National Endowment for the Arts. Agee's first major work, Lake Michigan Bathroom, made during her residency at the Kohler Factory in Sheboygan, Wisconsin, features architecture and anatomy of plumbing, all inspired by Delft and Staffordshire wares. And trust me, it's like one of the most beautiful bathrooms I've ever seen. Artist Beverly Sims says she makes mud look good. She received an MFA from Yale, but did not start working with clay until she herself became a teacher. She took classes to expand her knowledge of the material and eventually fell in love with it. Her shinnecock pots, which are displayed in the Dirt on Delight show, are hand-built and nearly big enough to crawl into. She was always wondering how many handles are too many handles, how much glaze is too much glaze. Her work often teeters somewhere between success and failure, a place that she likes. for her second solo exhibition in 2006 entitled Bloodshot Pot at the Shoshana Wayne Gallery in Santa Monica, California. Semmes paid homage to notorious markswoman of the Wild West, Annie Oakley. 3 of Semmes' trademark dresses as sculpture sported exaggerated right arms, possibly alluding to Oakley's trigger hand, and 12 crystal vessels reference the glass balls that Oakley was known for shooting as part of her act. And lastly, I'd like to welcome Andria Hickey, the Walker's curatorial fellow and coordinating curator for this exhibit. She's worked tirelessly on this exhibit as well as numerous other things here at the Walker, so I'd like to welcome her up to talk about the Dirt on Delight show, and then we'll get started. Thank you.
I have to speak into this microphone to make sure you can hear me because we're being recorded. Welcome, thank you for coming to our panel discussion. I'm hoping that everyone's seen the show. It's been up since July, and it's really generated a lot of conversation, I think, in the city and at the Walker itself. For those of you who haven't seen the show, it really brings together a wide array of works in clay. It spans over 100 years and includes the work of some 22 artists. It's a pretty exciting exhibition to have here at the Walker because it's a medium-specific show, and it is a show that features objects and sculpture, but they're all works made in clay. And one of the reasons we were really eager to bring artists in the show to come and speak with us is to really talk about what's happening in studios and to talk about different artists' experience using this medium. And Beverly and Anne and Kathy all come to clay from very different places. They're not always working in clay, and they've all had very different educational experiences. So it's interesting to see very contemporary sculpture returning to clay, something that's very historical and has a long tradition in terms of ceramics and even further back into history. So tonight, what we're going to do to familiarize everybody a little bit with each of the artists' individual practices, we'll do kind of like a quick 10-minute presentation of each artist, and then we'll have a 30-minute discussion, then we'll take questions afterwards. So Beverly is going to start. Oh, and by the way, if everyone, I'm sure, noticed, the video that was playing when you came in is a wonderful little film that Anne Agee, here on the end, had made of a demonstration of her making one of her pieces. And I thought it was such a wonderful experience to see how some of those very delicate works were made. It would be great to share with everyone. So can we start our PowerPoint presentation? Oh, and I have a question. Where is the clicker? The clicker.
Oh, it's right here.
Here's your clicker.
Here's my clicker.
Here's your clicker.
All right. So this is a picture of me taken in 1995, putting underglaze on a very big pot with a very small brush while wearing a dust mask. I kind of have some idea why I was making that really big pot, but I have no idea why I was using a really small brush, and absolutely no idea why I was wearing a dust mask. I thought I'd start by putting the work that's in the show, my work that's in the show, in context of how I made it. Those orange pots upstairs, Shinnecock pots, were made in 2001, and I showed them in 2002 in a gallery in Dusseldorf, Germany. And this was the upstairs of the gallery. The show was called On the Lake. And so there was this dress form upstairs with one pot on it. And then downstairs, I showed a group of the pots. And there were photographs. There was a video of me walking around between the pots. And So fast forward to more recent. This is, so I thought I'd run through just a few recent shows and then some shots of my studio more even like last week. So this was the show, as mentioned in the introduction, in Allison's introduction, at Shoshana Wayne Gallery, Bloodshot Pot. And this is a dress piece. The piece goes out maybe 25 feet into the room, so it's huge, a little wide-angle lens distortion, but 15 feet wide. And in the dress is this cast glass. Looks like cement. Actually, it was glass it was one of the first glass pieces that I made, and I made it by working with glass pros at Pilchuck, and I made a ceramic pot, and then we poured liquid glass into the pot, and it was an incredible mess, actually. It fired the clay, which we should have thought of sooner, and clay bits were like, everybody in the studio ran for cover, ceramics was spewing up, and the glass went down, and it's funny that it looks like cement after all that intensity. So there again, the pot, and then a ceramic piece, and then these more current glass pieces that I made also at Pilchuck. And I don't know if I have a close-up of those, but these were made in a way like my ceramic pieces. I struggled quite a bit with what to do with the glass. I couldn't keep doing the spewing ceramic pots, so I tried this coiling of the glass pots and finally ended up with some in this territory where I kind of treated the glass a lot like it was ceramics. And this was in the back room, or side room, I guess you could say. It's about 14 inches high. Paint on ceramic. And then this is huge, actually. It's, I said yesterday at the U of M when I spoke that it was 6 by 9, but it's like 9 by 12 or something like this. It's huge. And now it's last winter in Dallas, and these are two kind of a face-off between Olga and Ophelia here, with velvet and taffeta and ceramics. And my studio. More recent glass are bigger, and these are, well, I guess that's the red, are those red pots in the show? No,
Those
but.
are the red pots in the show?
Yeah, those are the red pots in the show.
Yeah.
Those are the red pots in the show. So there they are in the studio, looking like candy. And I just have a few of these more recent glass pieces that I made at the Tacoma Museum of Glass that are taller, maybe 3, even up to 3.5 feet. Huge, actually, really heavy. For glass, they're huge. That one's more like 4 feet.
They're pretty.
It's funny to look down at the monitor while you're looking up there. You must be wondering
they
what
look
I'm looking at.
so different when they're on
Up
the
there?
big screen. They're huge.
They're huge. And then this is super recent. This is upstate, where I now have a place upstate in the woods, and I took over the living room of the house and turned it into my studio. And so I thought I'd just flash through some pictures of recent work in the studio. These pots that I've been making by stacking them. So making kind of smaller works as units and then putting them together. And then taking them into my greenhouse/paint booth in the woods and painting them orange or red or something, whatever this color is. It's true that I make mud look good. I found this sticker in a truck stop in this little town called Marigold, Mississippi, where I happened to be last spring, in a section of the truck stop filled with like raunchy truck paraphernalia. And I couldn't believe it when I saw this sticker.
It's a great sticker.
Yeah,
it's
now
perfect.
Thank you. It's my logo. Okay.
Oh, I'm going to do it first.
Oh, you're gonna do it?
I'm going to do the clicker.
Okay.
This is not my work, but this is something that we will probably get to talking about a little bit later. This is a piece by Bob Arneson, who was my instructor at UC Davis. So now we can go to my work. This is an example of a piece that I made while I was in undergrad school, so this is pretty old. And I'm going to be, the slides that images that you're looking at are a few examples of pieces from graduate school until what I'm doing now. And we can move on. These pieces are the pieces at Davis were about 9 inches tall, and the pieces, which I'm kind of, I guess, known for or whatever, are between 3 to 6 or 7 inches tall. And some of the works that I've been doing recently, which are actually in a show now in LA, are larger pieces, which you will end up seeing in this presentation. They're larger pieces, and I'm working small again as of right now in my studio. I thought I would just talk a little bit about, we're going to be touching on this a little bit later, but why I work with clay. And we were bringing this up before, and I was thinking, I love clay because I can do everything with clay. I can make something organic, I can make something geometric, I can make something representational, abstract, and these are things that I combine in my work. And also the glazing is very much a part of the clay, so I get to work with paint. The idea of painting these sculptural forms, it really satisfies a lot of desires within me. Let's see, content-wise, I really think of my pieces as self-portraits. I mean, they don't exactly look like me, but they are about what's going on in my life and what I'm thinking about at the time. So progressively, as you've been watching images, the works kind of started out about, after grad school, about me falling in love with my husband. So they're very passionate works, and something that's also really wonderful about clay is forming it. You get to caress them and make them into what you are feeling. So as the pieces developed, I have 2 kids, so the pieces started talking very much about my belly. So a lot of the works were about my belly. And I have to say that I don't consciously think of these things while I'm making them. I can kind of talk about this in hindsight, because when I'm making the works, they're stream of consciousness. They're just what I feel at the moment. Let's see. Sorry, I'm thinking about my notes here. This is an example of one of the larger pieces, which, so in terms of scale, the earlier pieces, which are very personal and hopefully universally felt, they're small because they're very internal. The piece that's here that you're looking at, it's larger, and larger meaning like you could fit 5 of my small pieces within it, but they're still, I guess you would consider them small. They're about 10 inches to 12 inches tall, not even 12 inches, that's a lie, maybe 10 inches tall. And the reason they had to get bigger, I kind of had no control over it. I feel like the work, it's kind of like a yin-yang type of thing. Like, it tells me what it wants to do, and I tell it what it wants to do. And if one of us pushes too hard, the piece doesn't work. But because I was speaking these larger pieces, I'm speaking about things that are a little external rather than totally interior feelings. I'm speaking about things such as the war and ecology and stuff like that. So they're things that are larger than myself, so they had to become larger. And with these larger pieces, I feel like with my smaller works, I was trying to make pieces which are beautiful and small, and they beckon you to come over to them. And then when you do get up to them, you realize, oh, there's something really weird about them. There's something off-putting or icky. There was an ick factor, and I like ick. So I like beauty and ick. So with the larger pieces, I was consciously trying to make them ugly, and then I want to save them. We can move on a little bit. So in terms of process also, the pieces are fired between 10 and 30 times. And we can get into that later when we have our discussion. But this is an example of a piece which is also in LA right now. And this is an installation shot. The works first traveled to a show in Santa Fe, at Site Santa Fe. And the title of the exhibition was Pretty Is As Pretty Does. So we can, the last one was another installation shot at Site Santa Fe. So you can kind of get an idea of my large works, and you saw in the other gallery here the small works. So there's my scale. This is a piece called Higher. I think this might be my last image, I'm not sure. No, sorry, Whaleburger. So these are examples of the larger pieces that have, this is the guy that was probably fired about 30 times. Anyway, that's it.
I have to excuse myself for having 4 images. I discussed this, and we thought we would show my film, which is 10 minutes, but we did that already. So I'm just going to talk about my coming to clay. I was asked about this, and it was a good question. It was nice to think about it all over again. I came to clay 4 times. First when I was 8 or 9, visiting a neighbor who opened her studio to the kids on the block on Mondays. Second in junior high when I took a class. Don't remember the teacher or the students, but I remember making a Mexican-style candelabra and a Danish design-inspired picture. Third, when I was at Cooper Union undergrad, I took a sculpture class with Ruben Kadish, who left me alone to do what I wanted. And I made unglazed heads inspired by Chinese and Indian Buddhas and Benin and Ife sculpture. And finally, the 4th time I came to clay, it stuck. I was in graduate school at Yale doing painting, where the intensity and competitive atmosphere about making art was at a new level for me. It was after 1 year that I took a clay class at the Greenwich House Pottery. I thought I would make a set of dishes to eat from. Taking a breather from Yale, I would mix function with painting. I imagined at the end of a 4-week clay class, I'd have my dishes and be done with ceramics, and continue being the painter I was supposed to be. But what happened is the all or nothing, sink or swim, intellectually rigorous attitude that I picked up, accepted, and had become a part of me and my ambition at Yale kind of fused itself into this new material. It was a natural transfer. I had loved the history of painting, especially the Renaissance, and now I was looking at Italian Majolica. I superimposed the same intensity and curiosity I had for painting to my clay work. As this clay thing went on, I wanted to know how Bernard Palissy made his work. What did luster de ruta mean? What was Egyptian paste? What was the red in Islamic tiles? Maybe just red clay? What was China paint? I loved that my teachers did not know. They had no authority in this area. It felt like it all belonged to me. My initial desire to gulp down and swallow whole all ceramic history, all ceramic technique in the Metropolitan Museum, from German beer steins to Dutch tiles, Italian Majolica, and Tang Dynasty lead glazed figures. That was my approach. Function was the key to liberating myself from the intensity of the intensely serious aura that infected the air at Yale. Painting had begun to feel like a privileged child bound to be art before the paintbrush had touched the canvas. I loved working with clay because the challenge was so clear. It was not art. It would take lots of figuring out to draw that kind of interest from something made of clay. The figurine became interesting to me when I learned about its origins, that figurines were made to be used at the dessert table of the nobility. that they were kept in a pantry and only on display with food, dishes, soup tureens, etc. They were never placed around the living room like small sculpture. Their strangeness, not really functional and not really sculpture, that really attracted me. I've made many figurines since, and this piece that you keep looking at here is inspired by the dessert table of the 18th century. I call this Boxing in the Kitchen. It's about fantasy and living with children and consuming sweets and making things up and living in a playful way and communicating with children. This last slide, let's see, the one of the vases. Like the film that you saw, these vases are copies, kind of drawn 3D copies of a vase and a bunch of vases that I found in a thrift store. And I think the vases and the figurines are all in the same realm. They occupy that same sort of decorative and pretty and small and tchotchke, kitschy. There's a range of good and bad in there, but I think they're sort of interchangeable, and I make them in the same way. Those are four. I also have begun to, you can see it in this piece here in this show, that I've begun to repeat myself. So I make, instead of many different parts, I really find it interesting to repeat myself as if I am working in a factory. But it's a sort of absurd thing to not use a mold, to just start from scratch all over again. That's all.
Great. Thank you, guys. That was really wonderful to share. Well, we met earlier today, and I think we realized that we could probably talk for a really long time. The show upstairs really invites a lot of different discussion around a lot of different themes. It's really special because I think clay, we were talking earlier, clay as a medium is really open, and you can really attack a lot of different kinds of subject matter and content in your work. And one thing that I think at least most of the artists in the show have in common, certainly I think the three of you, is the idea of irreverence. And we talked a little bit earlier about, Ingrid Schaffner, one of the curators of the exhibition from ICA, in her essay in the catalog described things as dirty, pretty stuff. And I thought that was or pretty dirty stuff. I thought it was a great way to sort of have that juxtaposition of the dirt of clay as a material, and then there's like humor and delight and subversion that's happening in the actual content of the objects, and also their form.
You were also pointing out that some of the early clay makers were men and worked in a very macho way.
I did point that out, yes.
And I think like lots of areas where one studies, maybe it's in engineering, I don't know, maybe, but it's certainly in painting when I was in school, or in sculpture, in clay. I remember that about, I don't know, hearing about clay places, that they're dominated, they were, by men, and I think I don't know, there's just so many women working in clay, and there is this sort of feminist side to it that we tap into, I think.
When I was in school, I went to Skowhegan summer program this summer after undergraduate school, and I was making things out of Play-Doh, and I had them on this table, and they had all these amazing people come through. Louise Nevelson came through, and asked me if Play-Doh was my medium, and if that was my thing, and Peter Volkos came through, And he showed up quite late, actually, from what his expected hour was, and he came in a pickup truck, and it was almost like he breezed down this dirt road, and this cloud of, this dust ball, came
Like a
after him and
cowboy?
blew around, and he rolled out of the truck, along with five guys, I guess, I don't know. This impression was the truck, and the dust, and then pretty much drunken, I think I can say, pretty good guess, pretty drunken men all kind of spilled out of at him, and then these burly young assistants, and then he's set up for this demo, it was absolutely unbelievable. It was so macho. I couldn't believe it.
Is that why you started working in clay?
I was way
You were
before I
"I'm
was
gonna
into
be a
clay, I was
cowboy"?
just into Play-Doh. It made an impression. I went to bed early that night and I heard the partying went on.
Peter Volkos, there's 2 pieces in the exhibition, and he had such a huge impact, I think, in his region or maybe all over America in terms of clay, and really pushing the medium from sort of relegation to a craft to taken seriously in the contemporary art world. And I think that's great, but it is true. There's interesting juxtaposition in the exhibition between the older, sort of groundbreaking artists and then what's happening in contemporary art. And one of the other artists, Nicole Cherubini, has a massive disregard for the history of ceramics, or she's playing with that disregard, which I think is fascinating too.
I mean, to me, those Volkos pieces are amazing.
Yeah,
wonderful,
they're
the ones you have in
special.
the show.
I think for me, in the introduction, we were kind of talking about how Viola Fry, I consider her macho.
Yeah.
And I studied with Arneson and some of the macho guys, and I kind of found that you didn't see it, but I used to work really large, 9 feet tall, right after I was inspired by Viola. And I found that my works are just so much more powerful. Instead of being 9 feet tall, 9 inches tall, that's where I found my strength. They're not macho, but they're powerful. They're kind of like vitamins. Everything's in there.
Yeah, you talked earlier about you could walk up to them and get punched in the face when you start to see what's actually happening.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think there's an irreverence also in the content of what's happening with the playfulness of the subjects, but then when you start to get closer to them and actually look at what's happening, everything's hanging out, including there's a birthing, there's a woman slitting a pig. It's just
I
no
think
holds barred.
At some point, I just felt like describing myself, my family, what I value. And I would love to know how to butcher a pig. I really would. And I did learn how to pluck feathers from a chicken. And I felt that was very earthy, like making clay things. Some of those pieces in this show are of myself and my children. And there's one, they're not really portraits. I don't care about likenesses, but all the ones with the mother and the child are really me and my kids. And there's one with this sort of older boy who should really not be touching his mother's breasts. And that is so much my experience, this sort of awkwardness of trying to be a mother in a different way than my parents were parents. And then finding myself, looking at myself, thinking, what is my 7-year-old doing with his hand up my shirt in public? It's sort of modern in a way, updating the figurine.
Figurine, I heard, was a dirty word. When Janelle and Ingrid came for their opening day talk, they talked a lot about you embracing the figurine, but it being quite a subversive act to even be making figurines.
I think it's like a pot. Like, how do you make a dish? Important. How do you make a cup? And that's my interest in it, that it's in that realm.
Mm-hmm.
It's not like figurative sculpture, I think.
Beverly. I'm thinking about Irreverence in your work in terms of also form and like how you make your pieces. You were joking today about your skills in the clay world. Do you want to talk a little bit about your process for people who might not know?
No.
Oh.
They're coil pots, and I like them in this kind of fairly rough state. There's a kind of, to me it's very, I thought the essays divided the work, and I guess the dirt on delight idea is this kind of very, I see it also as a distinction between the ceramics part where you make the thing and then you glaze the thing, that there's this kind of dirty part or mud part, and that, is dealt with in one essay in the catalog, and then there's the glazing part. And for me, it's always like you start out with a wet blob of clay, it's kind of perfect, a wet blob of clay. And then you are working with the wet clay, it's great. And then you finish the thing, it's wet, great. And then it starts to dry, not so great, looking a little dusty, drying out more, shrinking, getting smaller, getting really fragile, looking less good. You fire it. It shrinks again, it gets darker, it gets dry, it gets a little, and then you've got to, pull it back up with the glaze, kind of. And then there's the kind of roughness that's in the situation of the clay tends to be very different from the glazing part, which has got a kind of recipe to it that needs to be a little more specific. And anyway, and I saw those essays as kind of being divided between that, something kind of more visceral and something more delightful. That was really interesting.
Yeah, it was I think the whole exhibition, all the works can almost fit in either side. There's lots of formless objects, and then there's these very, very delicate, very ornamental works. It's an interesting juxtaposition to see another artist in the show, Jeffrey Mitchell's work, who we are all looking at today. You assume that it's made from bronze, but it's actually very finely crafted clay, painted. We were talking as well, when I first saw your work, I thought, oh, is the pigment inside the clay somehow? Is it part of the clay? But it becomes this fused object.
I'm definitely interested in trying to get somewhere where those things aren't divided in quite the same way, and it isn't just a coating that goes on the outside.
Yeah, but you've never worked in like a latex or things like that.
I like those very matte paints.
Yeah, not rubbery. Not rubbery.
Not rubbery, not glossy.
Kathy, did you want to talk about Irreverence in your work as well?
I think for me, when I'm in the studio, I just get so involved in the work that I don't really think about, I think about other things, like I listen to the radio, and things from the news get involved in the content of the work. But basically, I kind of, I just make what seems right or feels right at the moment, and I really don't care what the reaction is to the work. Like, I know that people have certain ideas about what the work is about, and maybe I should be slightly embarrassed about some of the pieces or whatnot, but I'm not. I don't care. They have to be made, and I don't have any control over it. These things need to be made, and I'm kind of like the vehicle to make them. So that's it.
Makes sense. We also talked a lot about scale earlier, and how I heard Beverly's talk last night, and she had this great line where you were talking about taking up space, and I thought that was a really interesting way to describe your work. And I think the pots take up space in a different way than the fabric pieces. There's a shock of color when you encounter them, and all of you are working in scale in different ways. Do you guys want?
We're supposed to talk.
I'll start. For me, scale is like vitally important to my work. I think some of my most successful pieces are what I think of as the smallest pieces, like the 3-inch pieces, and they wouldn't work larger. The scale is vital to them, and what I'm trying to do is really to, with the small scale, you have to get up close to the pieces, and to really get them, you have to go into their world. I'm kind of controlling you a little bit. I don't, I want you to get sucked up into my world and my thoughts, and I kind of feel like what my thoughts are kind of universal, so you may not know exactly what I'm talking about, but you'll kind of get it. Like, they're a little uncanny, like you kind of know what they're about, but you don't know what they're about. But in terms of scale, like, I feel like once you really look at them up close, they are not small anymore. Like, I have, when I work, well, now I see them as being small because I kind of jumped to a larger scale, but I have always thought of them as monumental because you have to, I don't know, I see myself going up to them and they're huge because I just feel that the subject is large, even though the pieces are small. And in terms of just their how they work visually, I'm very attentive to scale shifts in like the overall main body of the piece. A lot of times they're kind of spatial compared to the very tiny detailing that goes on the outside of the pieces, that because the detailing is so small, it makes the vessel or cup form feel a lot larger. So I'm kind of, I love playing with space in a small space.
I was struck by the fact that the photographs do make them look much more monumental, that you get on this level with them. Just, you've brought it up very big, and you can, I'm not sure that you can guess that they're as small as they are. To see them, I'll see a number of them, as I did last night, and then see them again in the gallery. It seemed just kind of shocking how small they were.
They are small.
Mm-hmm.
You could fit them in your pocket.
And somebody did.
Yeah.
What did you say?
I was just commenting on the fitting of.
They've been pocketed.
They've been pocketed, which is why they're under glass in our exhibition, sadly. But.
Well, I love Beverly's idea of taking up space. I think that's a very sort of subversive thing to do with a big dress or a pot, and it's influenced me. How do you make something small bigger and take up space? So my pieces, I put them together. I think also titling this piece AG Manufacturing Company makes it seem like there's much more. I have a factory. But you can see that I work pretty slowly. That film was like about 20 hours of work smushed into 10 minutes. So it's a kind of absurdist idea that I could take up space, but in that way.
This line that we're referring to, I was talking about these dress pieces that take up a whole room as being a kind of, the concept of taking up more space than you're sort of meant to, and what that means to the viewer, where the viewer's kind of pushed to the sidelines or given just a certain amount of space to walk around the pieces, and using that as a kind of metaphor for being in the world. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's a great metaphor.
Mm.
I also was really interested for everyone to talk a little bit about how they make their work, because I think, especially for my colleagues and maybe some people in the audience, I don't actually know how to throw a pot. And it's interesting, it's very fascinating to learn how these different works are made.
And to find out that none of us know how to throw a pot
well,
either.
some of you kind of know a little bit. And that the making of the work is not as evident as you think. Kathy, you talked earlier about firing work 20, 30 times, and I had assumed your pots were thrown, but they're not at all. And I think that's a really particular thing about clay. It's from an outsider perspective, it's very difficult to see the process behind what goes into making a work and how long it takes. And I know each of you work very differently. So.
Those pots I showed at the last bit of my work, I made these separate pots and then stacked them up and kind of discovered epoxy in this way that I guess I now realize how many sculptors are out there using epoxy. I had no idea. But anyway, yeah, not done on the wheel.
Not done on the wheel.
Not done on the wheel, no.
Not done on the wheel. I think something that I've always kind of been interested, my answer is longer than yours, I'm sorry. I've always been really, my work is so labor intensive, but something that I'm hoping happens when somebody's looking at it is that you just accept it as it is and you don't really think about the process at all. You just think that this thing is supposed to be here, and then maybe if you are interested, you can kind of ponder, like, well, how did she do that? And my process, my works are really collages, and the main body is starts out cast from a pint glass, and then I manipulate the form and fire that, so it's just a hollow piece of clay, really quite ugly when I start out, clunky, ugly, and I like to say that I carve them and I caress them, and I love them, and I kind of fall in love with the work as I'm making them, and I also have fights with them at a certain point in our relationship. But I fire the main piece, and then everything else is added later on. So with a different kind of clay body. So I make the initial form, fire it again with glaze, and then everything else is added in pieces, and the glaze is added one layer at a time. So I'll need a red, I'll fire that, take it out of the kiln, react to it. It's very much the way a painter would work. And then I'll add some more clay onto the piece, fire that, glaze it. So that's why they go up to so many firings, is because I don't know what the pieces are going to look like before they're done. I don't know what the content is going to be until they're done. So for me, that my works are really like riddles that I need to solve. I always think of them as like Rorschach tests and exquisite corpses that just evolve over time. So that's kind of my process.
I think that my work is always, I feel like I have permission, or I get very excited about something if it's related to some old thing that I've seen. So the boxing in the kitchen piece was made of earthenware, and I painted it with flash and matte acrylic, and I painted the paper with the same color. And I was very excited when I realized, all that marble in Greece, all of the small terracottas from Greece, all of that stuff was actually painted. And I saw some work from China in a show at the Met, and there were little doll toys, and they had been in a tomb, and they're sort of recently discovered among all these other objects, and they were painted in the same way, and it sort of, I don't know why, but I do get very excited when my work looks like something older or has, and this white work is made with a gas kiln, and I never really was interested in a gas kiln before, until sort of accidentally I had to fire my work with other people in a gas kiln and fell in love with that process. The way that I build things, I feel like it's a lot like the way that I draw. Drawing is sort of just something that I've always done. So drawing, 3D drawing.
Can I change the subject?
Yeah, totally. Go for it.
I was thinking when Anne was talking, and just how we're having a kind of love-in panel here.
We are.
And I thought I might just address the fact that, for like different group shows, when I'm in a group show, usually it's a bunch of people that I don't know, kind of bunched together for some reason. And this show is really unusual for me because I knew so many people. Like I knew so many people in the show. Like they're my friends. This show is me and there's certainly plenty of people I didn't know and work I didn't know before, but Anne and I went to school together and have been in what for me has been a really important dialogue and since we were in school, and watching Anne sort of stand up to the really scary people in the painting department and show ceramics in her studio was just absolutely mind-blowing. And I think that a number of us, Kathy, I met more recently, but Arlene Sheckett, I also know really well, and Nicole Cherubini was a student of mine, and both Arlene and Nicole went to RISD, but the kind of conversations we've had around kind of pushing each other kind of deeper into craft, I think you'd say, into some place that was kind of scary to go to, and
Why was it scary to go to?
I don't know. Leaving that, it wasn't what was going on in the Yale Sculpture Department any more than it was what was going on at the Yale Painting School. And I just kind of looking for some different model and also kind of not knowing anything about it and having the courage to go forward with perhaps limited technique and even interest in learning a lot of technique.
When Janelle and Ingrid came and talked about the show, or even in their catalog, they described putting this checklist together, and it was really, they went to the artist studios to find out who else was working this way and sort of had this lead between artists suggesting other artists, and this like clay family kind of emerged. And that's also, I think, how the older figures ended up in the show for them. But is this the first show where you felt like you've all been able to come together, or have you been in other shows together? Certainly, I know this is a clay show that's not happened before.
Beverly and I were in the Bad Girls show
I know that.
we were bad girls together. And then I curated a show called The Bong Show, and Nicole was in it, and Annie G was in it.
Somebody asked you about bongs, actually.
The Bong Show. When I was at Pilchuck, I was really amazed that there were all these people quietly making bongs, and I just thought it was kind of funny. And then I started asking people about that idea that they'd be teaching a ceramics class, and people would be in the corner making bongs secretly, and I kind of thought it.
Teapots.
What's that?
They're making teapots.
Right. I'm making teapot.
Can you please tell the story of the wheel
What story of the wheel?
with the suit?
Oh, the suit, the zip-up suit. I taught a class that included ceramics, and I was meant to teach the wheel when I very first started teaching, pretty soon after graduate school, and so I was meant to teach the wheel, and I knew the wheel only like a little tiny bit, and I had this parachute outfit that somebody had given me, which was bright orange and zipped up. It had a million zippers on it, but it was a coverall, essentially, made in some kind of ripstop nylon. It was really thick, actually, thicker than that. Anyway, big outfit that was bright orange. So I put this thing on in an effort to kind of make people think it was like, there were a lot of kind of girls in my class with long fingernails. It was a Catholic girls' school. And so I thought, this will really freak them out. Like, I made a really big deal that it was like really, like the wheel went really fast and it was really dirty to try to scare them away from doing the wheel. Yeah. And then I figured it out so that like partway through the class, I said I'd hurt my foot or something. I like did like a little bit of the demo, and then I asked if anybody had taken ceramics in high school, and then I got them to do the rest of the demo. That's the story you wanted to hear.
Yeah, I like that story. It's a great story. You guys all talked about the wheel. It's like
Love, hate with the wheel.
love, hate with the wheel.
Hate, hate
Or
with the wheel.
hate, yeah.
I just learned how to throw on the wheel so I could teach.
And I did too, and I lied to get my job. I said I could do it, and then I learned. But I also think that the wheel, Betty Woodman said this about it, that not many people used the wheel in this show, and she was a little bit miffed about that. And it was interesting. I thought it was a challenge, and in the same way that I think for me to make my artwork out of clay was a challenge, what she said to me made me think that making work on the wheel is like we were talking about Glenn Adamson, who wrote Thinking Through Craft, and he talks about the greater art world being like an ocean, and the crafts being these smaller lagoons that are sort of comfortable and cozy, and you can sort of move in and out of them, but there's always that like warm water. And I just, when Betty said that, I thought, well, yeah, clay is a lagoon, and the wheel is further up the lagoon, and so therefore more challenging to swim in the ocean or something. I don't know.
Yeah,
Betty Woodman made a bong for the bong show.
she did not.
She totally did.
Whoa. That's great. Well, one last thing before we open it up to questions. I'm curious if this show has brought up new things for you in your own work, new ideas about working in clay, or new relationships, friendships, artist friendships.
We had a big
Questions
party.
about the future?
It totally made me think about that hot orange color, which I hadn't used in a while, and that's led to those newer pieces in the orange, bigger, more handly orange pots. Yeah.
Mhm.
It was nice looking at that work again. And
Well, I got to meet these guys, and I mean, I've known your work and known you a little bit, and knew your work and didn't know you, and now you guys are my friends. But also, like, in terms of, like, where I think my work is or whatever, like, I'm so happy to visit my little babies in the other room again. I'm so happy to see my pieces again, and it just, for me, reinforces that I like working kind of tight. And I guess I just feel, after working large for the last 2 or 3 years, I am working smaller again, and now I'm feeling very, very comfortable claiming that territory again. So it's reinforcing to see the old work.
Tomorrow I'm going to speak to another group of people, or several groups of people, and I was asked to do a demonstration, and I've never done that before, and I felt really uncomfortable about that. So that's where that film came out of, and I was very conscious of this separation between sort of a Walker Art Museum audience, even though I'd never been here. There's everybody knows about the Walker, and so that was like the art thing. That was the same separation that I felt. And it was really interesting to find out that you guys wanted me to show that film here with the art audience, and that was really meant for the clay folk that would just love it.
Yeah.
And I sort of felt like a little nervous about that. Like I spoke to some people I teach with, and one of the sculptors said, "Oh, never do a demonstration. No. Doesn't have anything to do with me.
Well,
How I make my work doesn't have anything to do with it." And I thought it really does for me. And so when I made these, I did some stop action before I made this. I also started filming myself weeding the garden and washing the dishes, and canning tomatoes, and it just, I don't know where that will go, but coming here and sort of thinking about those things has been kind of interesting for me.
Well, both you guys, if you did a demonstration in real time, everybody would have to be there for like weeks on end.
It was exciting from when I saw your video, I think, to be able to show it here because we are so often, or I think our audience are often very removed from the studio and from seeing people work with their hands. We have a lot of really amazing theoretical conversations or conceptual conversations, and it's really great to be able to learn about a skill and a technique and see something come into shape, and your film is very good. So I think it's a different way in.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so maybe we can open up to conversation that includes you all out there. Can we turn down these lights a little tiny bit? They're very blinding. Thank you. Oh, there's actually people going around with microphones if you have questions, because we'll record it for the channel and they'll be able to hear your question. Any thoughts, comments?
It's all those things. Yeah, I'm doing them all concurrently.
Because I really like the glass because it almost looks like water thrown up and frozen in motion. It looks like water thrown up and frozen in motion.
Thank you. It is a way. It's working in some similar ways to the. I'm using a kind of ceramics technique in that I'm coiling them, and I'm working with strain. Of course, I'm working with 7 people or something. They happen super fast, like in an hour. And but I like that, working fast and making the decisions really fast and having it kind of freeze before I have the time to kind of think too much about it.
Any other questions? Right here.
There is a really long tradition, even ancient tradition in ceramics that women are associated with hand building and men are associated with working on the wheel. There's a kind of division of technology there. So I guess I'd be interested in whether any of you have looked at that or thought about that. That you really are following in a tradition that may be distinctly un-American in the 20th century, but fits in with a very, very, very long tradition around the world.
I didn't know that. And I guess because it's a machine and it's important and it has a motor or something, that a man would be more in charge of it. I don't know.
What it makes me think about is that the craft has been used also in more recent history as a kind of feminist kind of subject matter and something to work out of. That was interesting to me, this sort of culture of. It's always been interesting to me that, culture of women making stuff in their basement, the ceramics kind of home industry, that's possible, the craft of it, the kind of, I think there's a kind of flipping around of that underdog status of craft. But specifically the wheel, I didn't know that. It's interesting. I don't think we're running away from the fact that women are using it. That's kind of why it's interesting, flipping it, making it do something else. We hope.
Thanks.
How do you see yourself in the context of contemporary studio ceramics, meaning artists that make a living from their craft?
It's really hard. But we were talking about it a little bit this morning. Just for me, my husband's a painter, and I do what I do, and we have 2 kids, and we live in Manhattan. Our studios are there. And a few years ago, we both decided to take the leap of faith, as we call it, and we got rid of our day jobs. Part of it for my husband was our accountant said, well, you would make more money if you could sell like 1 or 2 more paintings a year than you do from your day job. So we both decided to just go for it and just work in our studios, which is kind of terrifying, having 2 children, living in Manhattan, blah, blah, blah. But we're doing it. And we're poor, but we're really, that was our choice. Like, I really want to spend as much time in my studio and with my kids and in my, doing what I want to do. So that's my life. That's what I want to do. So I'm kind of, I don't really have to have an extravagant life because I'm pretty content with what I'm doing, and I might have to get a job at some point, but I'm trying not to because it is my job. So.
We were talking a little bit earlier today about the difference in terms of like value systems and economic systems of exchange, and it being so very different, I think, like the gallery world being very different, I think, in contemporary art versus contemporary craft, and this different kind of, I guess, system of institutions that support those different fields. And I was curious about that collapse between them, those various support systems, and I'm wondering if that would ever happen, or if things would continue to divide based on those kind of different systems. 2 more questions, I think, or a bunch more, actually.
Do you think you guys ever have background in any other type of sculpture besides ceramic sculpture, and are still doing other types of sculpture now?
Say that again?
Could you say it again? Yeah.
Did anybody come from just a straight sculptural background and then became involved in ceramics? And is anybody doing any other type of sculpture right now besides ceramic?
I'm making wallpaper.
I know how to weld, but I like squishy.
I mean, for me, it's all sculpture, really, and it's all craft at the same time. I'm not really, I don't know I'm not sure if you're thinking about something more like marble, but that I'd say I had a sculpture background.
You're still making.
I still see it as sculpture.
Yeah, I would
Mhm.
see all of your work as sculpture, but maybe using clay sometimes, or not always.
You talked earlier about craft, and I'd love to know if you consider yourselves craftspeople or artists, and why it seems that craft is kind of a dirty word in the art world.
I consider myself an artist, and I use craft, and I use my eyes and my head and put it all together. I think a craftsman can work for an artist or for a factory, or I think an artist puts thinking and craft together. If you're a painter, you have craft. When I was at Yale, they talked about craft all the time, but they wouldn't let me plug in my kiln because it was craft. But
They were talking about the craft of painting, you mean?
all the time, but they wouldn't say that that's what they were talking about.
For me, I just think of myself as an artist, and but I care very much about craftsmanship in my work. That's kind of what you were talking about. I don't the craft as a dirty word thing. I don't think about it when I'm making the work, and it's everybody else's business but mine. Because I just for me it's. I just have to worry about myself, and I can't. I used to, when I was in school, think about things like being in the craft ghetto or the clay ghetto, but I don't want to waste my time thinking about it. I just other people can talk about it, but I just need to make my thing. Done.
Mm-hmm. I mean, it seems to me that, these different categories between things in a general way are more and more broken down. These,
It's almost like a non-issue, or like not. I mean, lots of contemporary artists work in different ways that use different kinds of craftsmanship. I mean, maybe even the history of craft and its use. I mean, like you can even say printmaking is a craft. I don't know if it matters. People just make things, and it's evaluated not only on its craftsmanship. It's also about what the content is and how it relates to other histories and ideas, and so it's hard to even understand how to get into that conversation because it feels like it's a non-issue, I think. I mean, we're doing a big clay show at the Walker, so I think that's a pretty illustrative point.
I just want to say one more thing about the materials that we're working with. I think that's something that's so incredibly important, or something that I hear from students when I do talk to them, people who don't major in art, who take a ceramic class as a prerequisite or whatever. They love getting their hands in the dirt, and they love making something with their hands. And I feel like it's kind of a reaction to our removal in our contemporary world, is that we everything is kind of digitized, and you can make great art out of all that stuff. But I feel like there's, especially living in New York City, there's a need to get physical and squish and get an emotional reaction and a physical reaction to something that's in your hands. And a lot of I'm talking about students, they don't get to do that. They're not really allowed to. I taught a class at Princeton one time, and some of the they have to fill out a form and kind of grade the teacher. And here I am at Princeton, and some of the students wrote, "This was the hardest class I've ever taken," and I was floored because they're all these geniuses, and I'm thinking that's because I made them go to a place where there are maybe no answers, that they had to go deep inside themselves, and maybe they weren't allowed to go there before. And so I found for them it was incredibly hard but incredibly rewarding to have to actually make something out of squish.
Does anyone have any more questions? I think we're... Oh.
Just a comment about this whole issue of craft.
Use the microphone.
Oh. I think it's just, terminologies have been gotten muddied. And with that, I think that students and anyone who's just beginning in the arts they're not being taught the difference between what art is and where craft fits into that. And so I think that's why craft is kind of getting a bad name, is because it's people want to disconnect from it, because it's not supposed to be a part of art. Art is supposed to be higher, and craft is supposed to be lower, and they really one doesn't really exist without the other. So I guess that's kind of what I'd like to add to that. Thanks.
Okay, well, thank you everyone for coming. I'd like to thank the Northern Clay Center and also the University of Minnesota Visiting Artists Program for co-sponsoring this event and working with us for the last few months to make sure we could bring everyone here to Minneapolis, and also to Allison Herrera for organizing this evening. So thank you for coming.